I should have kept walking, but that neon sign clawed into my eyes, dragging me toward the cursed bar like a fish on a hook. It was 1 a.m., and I was stumbling through a dead-end town off Route 17, drunk and raw from a fight with Sarah. We'd been at a greasy diner, arguing over money, her spending, my hours at the garage, stupid stuff that snowballed until I slammed my fist on the table and walked out. The cold bit my face, the streets empty except for cracked pavement and shuttered shops. My boots echoed, too loud in the silence. I didn't know where I was going, just away from her voice, her eyes, the weight of it all. The town felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. No cars, no dogs, just the wind hissing through alleys. I'd had 4 whiskeys at the diner, maybe 5, and my head was fuzzy, legs unsteady. I turned a corner, and there it was, a neon sign, red and blue, buzzing like a wasp trapped in a jar. The cursed bar, it read, the letters flickering, some half dead, casting jagged shadows on the pavement. The name was ridiculous, like a cheap Halloween prop, but it stopped me cold. My stomach twisted, a knot of dread I couldn't shake. Run, my brain screamed. Go back to Sarah, beg for the car keys, get out of this nowhere place. But my feet didn't listen. They moved, slow at first, then faster, like something was pulling me. The bar looked ancient, like it had been rotting there for centuries. The wooden facade was splintered, paint peeling in long, curling strips. The windows were so caked with grime they were nearly black, reflecting nothing but the sign's glow. No music leaked out, no laughter, no clink of glasses, just that hum, low and steady, like a dying fridge vibrating in my bones. I stood there, heart thumping, hand hovering over the door. It was heavy, cold as a freezer, the kind of cold that burns. I told myself to walk away, to find a gas station, call a cab, anything. But my hand pushed, and the door groaned open, a slow, creaking wail that made my teeth ache. Inside, the air hit me like a slap, thick, warm, reeking of stale beer and something sour, like blood left to pool in a butcher shop. The smell curled in my throat, and I gagged, covering my mouth. Dim bulbs hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly, casting shadows that didn't match the shapes around them, too long, too sharp, sliding across the walls like they were alive. The room felt too small, the walls leaning in, the ceiling too low, like a box closing around me. 3 people were there, scattered like ghosts. A woman in a red dress sat at a table, staring at her drink, her fingers tracing the glass's rim. A guy in a trucker hat hunched over a notebook at the bar, scribbling so fast his pen scratched like claws. An old man sat in a corner booth, muttering to himself, his voice a low drone that pricked my skin. None of them looked at me. It was like I wasn't there, like I'd walked into a photograph. I shuffled to a bar stool, my boots sticking to the floor, leaving faint prints in the dust. The counter was littered with empty glasses, some cracked, some smeared with something dark. My hands were clammy, my heart pounding too loud in my ears. The bartender was there before I saw him move, tall, gaunt, his face all sharp angles, like he'd been carved from bone. His eyes were wrong, like wet stones, cold and unblinking, catching the light in a way that made my chest tighten. He didn't speak, didn't ask what I wanted. He just slid a glass of amber liquid across the counter, the scrape of glass on wood loud in the silence. It looked like whiskey, but it smelled wrong, ash, decay, something metallic, like blood mixed with rust. I forced a laugh, shaky, thinking it was a gimmick, some dive bar's idea of a joke. "What's this?" I said, my voice too loud, echoing in the quiet. He leaned in, close enough I could feel his breath, cold and sour. His voice was like gravel grinding under a boot. "First rule, drink what's given." My laugh died in my throat. First rule? What kind of bar had rules? I looked at the others, waiting for a smirk, a glance, anything to say this was a prank. The woman in red was whispering to her glass now, her lips moving fast, words I couldn't catch but felt like needles in my ears. The trucker's pen scratched harder, his knuckles white, pages black with ink. The old man's muttering grew louder, a jumble of sounds that twisted in my head, not quite words but heavy, wrong. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wanted to stand, to run, but my legs were glued to the stool. The bartender's eyes never left me, pinning me like a bug. The glass sat there, the liquid catching the dim light, almost swirling, like it was alive. I don't know why I reached for it. But I did. The glass burned my hand, like it was alive, and I should have dropped it, but those words, first rule, drink what's given, sank into me like teeth. The cursed bar's air was thick, choking, a mix of stale beer and a sour, bloody stench that clawed at my throat. The dim bulbs flickered overhead, casting shadows that slid across the walls, too sharp, too wrong, like they were watching me. The woman in red whispered to her drink, her lips moving fast, words I couldn't catch but felt like needles in my ears. The trucker's pen scratched his notebook, relentless, a sound like claws on bone. The old man's muttering was louder now, a low growl that twisted in my gut, not words but something ancient, something that didn't belong. My heart slammed against my ribs, too loud in the suffocating quiet. The bartender's eyes, wet and cold like river stones, pinned me to the stool. The liquid in the glass swirled, amber but wrong, like it was breathing, catching the flickering light in a way that made my skin crawl. It smelled of ash, rust, something dead, something you'd find in a ditch, left to rot. My hand shook as I lifted it, my fingers slick with sweat. I didn't want to drink it. Every part of me screamed to throw it, to run, to get out of this place that felt like a trap. But his stare was a weight, heavy as iron, and those words, drink what's given, looped in my head, a command I couldn't shake. I brought the glass to my lips. The smell hit harder, metallic, like blood mixed with decay. My stomach churned, bile rising, but I tipped it back. The liquid burned, not like whiskey, more like acid, thick and bitter, coating my tongue like oil. It tasted like death, like something alive was crawling down my throat. I gagged, my eyes watering, nearly spitting it out, but the bartender's gaze stopped me cold. I forced it down, sip by sip, each one worse, heavier, like swallowing gravel soaked in rot. My head spun, the room tilting, walls leaning in like they wanted to crush me. The hum in the air grew louder, pressing against my skull, vibrating in my chest, my teeth, my bones. It wasn't just sound. It was alive, pulsing, like the bar itself was breathing. I set the glass down, half empty, my hand trembling so bad it rattled against the counter. The bartender didn't move, didn't blink, his face all sharp angles, like he'd been carved from something that wasn't human. The air was thicker now, like I was drowning in it. The woman in red was still whispering, her voice a hiss, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass like she was casting a spell. The trucker's pen scratched faster, his knuckles white, pages black with ink that looked too red, too wet. The old man's muttering sharpened, a rhythm that made my skin prickle, like he was calling something, summoning it. I wanted to look at them, to see if they were real, but my eyes kept sliding back to the bartender, to that glass, to the liquid that still moved, still watched me. He leaned in, closer than before, his breath cold, sour, like the air in a grave. His voice scraped through the silence, low and heavy, each word a nail in my chest. Second rule, don't ask questions. My mind screamed, what is this place? What's in the drink? Why can't I leave? But my lips stayed sealed, glued shut by fear. The air turned heavier, like wet cement, pressing me down. My chest tightened, breath shallow. The woman in red stood, her chair scraping the floor, a sound like a scream that echoed in my skull. She moved to a corner, slow, deliberate, her red dress catching the light like blood. A jukebox was there, one I swore hadn't been there before, its chrome edges dull, its glass cracked. She pressed a button, and a hum filled the room, not music, but voices, low, layered, chanting something I couldn't make out but felt in my blood, like my name was woven into it. My pulse roared, drowning out the hum for a moment. I fumbled for my phone, fingers clumsy, desperate to text Sarah, to tell her where I was, to beg her to get me out. The screen flickered, static crawling across it, white and gray lines twisting like worms, like something was inside it. The trucker looked up, just for a second, his eyes bloodshot, wild, like he'd seen something I hadn't yet. "Don't," he hissed, his voice a blade cutting through the hum. I froze, my hand shaking, and shoved the phone back in my pocket. The hum was everywhere now, in my head, my teeth, my blood, louder, heavier, like it was trying to crawl inside me. The shadows on the walls moved faster, stretching into shapes that weren't right, hands reaching, faces with no eyes, things with too many limbs. My legs were lead, my voice gone, trapped in my throat. The bartender's stare was a chain, holding me to the stool. The glass sat there, the liquid still swirling, daring me to finish it. The first rule burned in my mind: drink what's given. My hand reached for it again, shaking so bad I nearly knocked it over. I didn't want to drink more. I couldn't. But my fingers closed around the glass, and the hum grew louder, chanting my name. My hands shook around the glass, the liquid's bitter burn still coating my throat, but it was the bartender's words, "Second rule, don't ask questions," that locked me in place, like a blade at my neck. The cursed bar's air was suffocating, thick with the stench of stale beer and that sour, bloody rot that clung to my lungs. The dim bulbs flickered, shadows twisting across the walls, stretching into shapes that didn't belong, hands, faces, things with too many edges. The woman in red's whispers grew sharper, her voice a hiss that burrowed into my skull. The trucker's pen clawed at his notebook, the sound like nails on a coffin. The old man's muttering was a growl now, words I couldn't grasp but felt like a curse, heavy, wrong. My heart pounded, a drum in my chest, drowning out the hum that pulsed through the room. The bartender's eyes, cold and wet like stones in a riverbed, never blinked. The glass sat half empty, the amber liquid swirling, alive, watching me. My stomach churned from the taste, acid, ash, something dead. I wanted to shove it away, to run, but my legs were lead, glued to the stool. The hum was louder, vibrating in my bones, my teeth, like the bar itself was alive, breathing around me. The woman in red stood at the jukebox, her fingers lingering on the cracked glass, the voices from it chanting, low and layered, my name woven into the sound. I tried to focus, to breathe, but the air was too thick, pressing me down. I glanced at the others, desperate for a sign this was a prank, a twisted bar game. The woman's lips moved faster, her eyes locked on her glass, now full again, untouched. The trucker's notebook was open, pages black with red ink, my name scrawled in jagged lines. The old man's head tilted, his muttering sharper, like he was calling something closer. My skin crawled. I wanted to ask, "What's happening? Who are you?" but the second rule burned in my mind, sealing my lips. My phone was useless, its screen a mess of static, like something was inside it, blocking me from Sarah, from the world outside. The bartender leaned closer, his breath cold, sour, like a grave's air. His voice scraped through the silence, each word a weight. "Third rule, don't look behind you." My blood froze. The urge to turn was instant, overwhelming, like something was breathing down my neck, close enough to touch. My shoulders tensed, my hands gripping the counter, knuckles white. I stared straight ahead, at the bartender's unblinking eyes, at the glass, at the flickering bulbs. The shadows moved faster now, sliding across the walls, reaching, curling like fingers. The hum turned into a pulse, a heartbeat, loud enough to shake my chest. I felt it, something behind me, heavy, watching, waiting. My neck burned with the need to look, but the rule held me like a chain. I checked my phone again, desperate for time, for reality. The screen flickered, then showed 3:42 a.m. I'd been here minutes, maybe 10. I glanced at the clock above the bar, 1:15 a.m. My heart stopped. 2 hours gone, vanished, like the bar had eaten them. My breath came fast, shallow. The woman in red was back at her table, her glass still full, her smile too sharp, too wrong. The trucker's pen stopped, his eyes meeting mine, bloodshot, hollow. The old man stood, slow, his shadow too long, stretching across the floor toward me. The hum was deafening, voices chanting my name, louder, closer. I wanted to scream, to run, but the third rule, don't look behind you, kept me frozen, staring at the glass, the liquid still swirling, daring me to break. The urge to look behind me burned like a fever, but the bartender's words, third rule, don't look behind you, held me like a vice, my eyes glued to the glass, its swirling liquid mocking me. The cursed bar's air was a chokehold, thick with stale beer and that sour, bloody stench that coated my lungs. The dim bulbs flickered, shadows twisting into claws, faces, things that shouldn't exist, sliding across the walls. The woman in red's whispers were a hiss now, sharp as glass, cutting into my skull. The trucker's pen clawed his notebook, the sound like bones snapping. The old man's muttering was a growl, low and heavy, words that felt like they were pulling something closer. My heart pounded, a hammer in my chest, drowning out the hum that pulsed through the room, alive, hungry. The bartender's eyes, wet stones that never blinked, bored into me. The glass sat half empty, the amber liquid moving, breathing, daring me to touch it again. My throat was raw from the taste, acid, ash, death. I couldn't move, my legs lead, my body pinned to the stool by fear, by the rules. The hum was louder, a heartbeat in my bones, my teeth, my blood. I glanced at my phone, desperate for an anchor, for reality. The screen flickered, static crawling like worms, then showed 3:42 a.m. I'd been here minutes, maybe 10. My eyes flicked to the clock above the bar, 1:15 a.m. My breath stopped. 2 hours gone, stolen, like the bar had swallowed them whole. My hands shook, sweat beading on my skin. The woman in red was back at her table, her glass full again, untouched, her smile too sharp, like a blade. The trucker's notebook was open, my name scrawled in red ink, over and over, wet and glistening. The old man stood, his shadow stretching too long, reaching for me across the floor. The hum turned into voices, chanting my name, low, layered, coming from the jukebox that shouldn't be there. I wanted to scream, to ask what was happening, but the second rule, don't ask questions, sealed my lips. My chest was tight, my breath shallow, like I was drowning in the air. The bartender leaned closer, his breath cold, sour, like a grave stench. His voice scraped through the silence, each word a nail. Fourth rule, don't speak unless spoken to. My throat locked. The urge to yell, to beg, to curse this place was overwhelming, but the rule choked me, my voice trapped. The air grew heavier, like wet stone, crushing me. The jukebox's voices swelled, not music but a chorus, chanting my name, louder, closer, like they were inside me. The woman in red moved again, her chair scraping, a sound like a scream that echoed in my bones. She pressed the jukebox's button, and the voices grew sharper, 1,000 whispers clawing at my mind. I fumbled for my phone again, fingers clumsy, desperate to text Sarah, to escape. The screen was static, lines twisting, blocking me from the world. The trucker's eyes met mine, bloodshot, hollow, his pen frozen. Don't, he hissed again, his voice a warning, a plea. The old man was closer now, his muttering a snarl, his face wrong, shadowed, like it was melting. The shadows on the walls reached for me, fingers stretching, curling. The hum was deafening, a pulse that shook the room, my body, my soul. I gripped the glass, the liquid still swirling, daring me to drink again. The first rule burned, drink what's given. My hand shook, my mind screaming to stop, but the rules held me, chained me. I couldn't speak, couldn't look, couldn't leave, the rules chained me to the stool. Don't look behind you, don't speak unless spoken to. But it was the glass, its liquid swirling like a living thing, that made my blood run cold. The cursed bar's air was a fist around my lungs, thick with stale beer and that sour, bloody stench that burned my throat. The dim bulbs flickered, shadows twisting into claws, eyes, shapes that weren't human, slithering across the walls. The woman in red's whispers were a blade, slicing through my skull, her glass full again, untouched, gleaming like blood. The trucker's pen scratched his notebook, the sound like teeth grinding, his pages dripping with red ink, my name scrawled in jagged loops. The old man's muttering was a snarl now, a chant that clawed at my bones, pulling something closer. My heart pounded, a drum in my chest, drowning the hum that pulsed through the room, alive, hungry. The bartender's eyes, wet and cold like stones in a grave, never left me. The glass sat half empty, the amber liquid moving, breathing, daring me to touch it. My throat was raw, the taste of ash and death still lingering from the sips I'd forced down. My legs were lead, my voice trapped by the fourth rule. The jukebox's voices swelled, not music but a chorus, chanting my name, low, layered, burrowing into my blood. The clock above the bar read 1:15 a.m., but my phone showed 3:42 a.m., 2 hours stolen, gone, like the bar had eaten them. My hands shook, sweat dripping onto the counter, mixing with the dust. I wanted to scream, to beg, to break the rules and run, but the air was too heavy, pressing me down like wet stone. The woman in red's smile was sharper now, her teeth glinting, too many, too wrong. The trucker's eyes flicked to me, bloodshot, hollow, his pen frozen. The old man was closer, his shadow stretching across the floor, too long, too dark, like it was reaching for my soul. The hum was a heartbeat, shaking the room, my body, my mind. I gripped the glass, my fingers slick, the liquid swirling faster, alive. The first rule, drink what's given, burned in my head, but I couldn't do it again. I couldn't. The bartender leaned closer, his breath cold, sour, like decay. His voice scraped through the silence, each word a hammer. Fifth rule, finish your drink. My heart stopped. Finish it? The liquid was poison, death, something worse. My stomach churned, bile rising, but his eyes pinned me, unblinking, daring me to disobey. The jukebox's voices grew louder, chanting my name, 1,000 whispers clawing at my mind. The shadows on the walls moved faster, reaching, curling like fingers around my throat. I lifted the glass, my hand shaking so bad it rattled, the liquid sloshing, catching the light like blood. The smell was unbearable, rust, rot, something alive and wrong. I brought it to my lips, gagging before it touched me. The taste was worse, thicker, like swallowing mud from a grave. I choked, my eyes watering, but I forced it down, sip by sip, each one burning, tearing at my insides. My head spun, the room tilting, the walls closing in. The glass was empty now, but the taste stayed, coating my tongue, my throat, my soul. The hum was deafening, a scream in my blood. The bartender's grin widened, too wide, too wrong. The woman in red laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The trucker's notebook fell open, my name everywhere, red and wet. The old man was beside me now, his face shadowed, melting, his eyes black pits. The shadows reached for me, cold, alive, and I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't look away. The empty glass sat like a curse, its bitter residue burning my throat, but it was the bartender's fifth rule, finish your drink, that chained me to the stool, my body trembling. The cursed bar's air was a noose, thick with stale beer and that sour, bloody stench that clawed my lungs. Dim bulbs flickered, shadows twisting into claws, eyes, shapes with too many limbs, slithering across the walls. The woman in red's laugh was a shard of glass, her smile too sharp, her glass full again, gleaming like blood. The trucker's notebook lay open, my name scrawled in red ink, wet, dripping, like it was bleeding. The old man's muttering was a snarl, a chant that tore at my bones, pulling something closer. My heart pounded, a hammer in my chest, barely drowning the hum that pulsed through the room, alive, ravenous. The bartender's eyes, wet stones that never blinked, pinned me down. My throat was raw, the taste of ash and death coating my tongue, my soul. The jukebox's voices swelled, chanting my name, 1,000 whispers burrowing into my blood. The clock above the bar read 1:15 a.m., but my phone showed 3:42 a.m., hours stolen, swallowed by this place. The rules, don't look behind you, don't speak unless spoken to, held me like iron, my legs lead, my voice gone. The shadows moved faster, reaching, curling like fingers around my heart. The woman in red stared now, her eyes too bright, too wrong. The trucker's pen was still, his gaze hollow, bloodshot. The old man was closer, his shadow stretching across the floor, too long, too dark, like it was alive. His muttering sharpened, words I couldn't grasp but felt like a blade, cutting deeper. He shuffled toward me, slow, deliberate, his boots dragging, scraping the floor like nails. His face was wrong, shadowed, like it was melting, his eyes black pits that sucked in the light. The air grew colder, heavier, the hum a deafening pulse, shaking my bones, my blood. I wanted to scream, to run, but the rules locked me in place, my body betraying me. He stopped inches away, his breath rancid, like rotting meat. His voice was a whisper, rough, broken. They see you now. My blood froze. Who? What? The urge to look behind me burned, but the third rule, don't look behind you, stopped me, my neck rigid, my eyes fixed on the old man's face, his shadow swallowing mine. The jukebox's voices were louder, chanting my name, a chorus of 1,000 throats, inside me, around me. The shadows on the walls twisted, forming hands, faces, things with no shape, reaching closer. My chest was tight, my breath shallow, like I was drowning in the air. The bartender's grin widened, too wide, his teeth glinting like knives. The woman in red laughed again, a sound that shattered my nerves. The trucker's notebook was closer now, pushed toward me, my name everywhere, red and wet, like it was written in blood. The hum was a scream now, vibrating in my skull, my soul. Something cold brushed my arm, not human, not real. I flinched, my heart stopping, but I didn't look, didn't speak. The old man leaned closer, his face dissolving into shadow, his eyes bottomless. The air was ice, the shadows alive, reaching, pulling. The bartender's voice cut through, low, heavy, a hammer in the dark. Sixth rule, don't leave until it's done. My mind broke. Done? What was done? The glass was empty, the rules chaining me, the shadows closing in. The old man's hand hovered, cold, trembling, like he was reaching for my soul. The old man's words, "They see you now," hung like a noose, his shadowed face inches from mine, but it was the hum, pulsing like a heartbeat, that made my blood freeze. The cursed bar's air was a chokehold, thick with stale beer and that sour, bloody stench that burned my lungs. Dim bulbs flickered, shadows twisting into claws, eyes, shapes with too many limbs, clawing at the walls. The woman in red's laugh was a blade, her smile sharp, her glass full again, gleaming like fresh blood. The trucker's notebook lay open, my name scrawled in red ink, wet, dripping, like it was alive. The old man's muttering was a snarl, a chant that tore at my soul, pulling something closer. My heart pounded, a hammer in my chest, barely drowning the hum that shook the room, ravenous, alive. The bartender's eyes, wet stones that never blinked, pinned me to the stool. The empty glass sat before me, its bitter residue coating my throat, my soul. The fifth rule, finish your drink, still burning in my mind. The jukebox's voices swelled, not music but a chorus, chanting my name, 1,000 whispers burrowing into my blood, my bones. The clock read 1:15 a.m., but my phone showed 3:42 a.m., hours stolen, swallowed by this place. The rules, don't look behind you, don't speak unless spoken to, held me like chains, my legs lead, my voice trapped. The shadows moved faster, reaching, curling like fingers around my heart. The jukebox was louder now, its voices sharp, a scream in my skull, chanting my name over and over, like they were calling me to something. The woman in red was back at her table, her eyes locked on me, too bright, too wrong, her smile splitting her face. The trucker pushed his notebook closer, its pages open, my name everywhere, red and wet, like it was written in blood, the ink pooling, dripping onto the counter. The old man leaned closer, his breath rancid, like rotting meat, his face dissolving into shadow, his eyes black pits. The hum was deafening, a pulse that shook the walls, my body, my mind. Something cold brushed my arm again, not human, not real, a touch that burned like ice. I wanted to scream, to run, but the rules locked me in place. My hand gripped the counter, knuckles white, my breath shallow, like I was drowning in the air. The jukebox's voices were inside me now, chanting louder, my name a curse, a chain. I tried the door in my mind, picturing the street outside, Sarah, the diner, but the bar held me, its walls breathing, closing in. The bartender's grin widened, too wide, his teeth glinting like knives. He leaned closer, his breath cold, sour, like a grave stench. His voice cut through the hum, low, heavy, a hammer in the dark. 7th rule, you don't choose when to leave. My heart stopped. The door was there, feet away, but it felt like miles, locked, sealed, part of this place. The jukebox's voices roared, my name a scream, the shadows reaching closer, hands, faces. Things with no shape. The trucker's notebook was inches from me, my name pulsing, alive. The old man's hand hovered, cold, trembling, like he was pulling me into the dark. The air was ice, the hum a blade, and I was trapped, the rules tightening around my soul. The 7th rule, you don't choose when to leave, was a chain around my heart, but it was the jukebox's voices, chanting my name like a curse, that made my blood turn to ice. The cursed bar's air was a fist, squeezing my lungs, thick with stale beer and that sour, bloody stench that burned my throat. Dim bulbs flickered, shadows twisting into claws, eyes, shapes with too many limbs, slithering across the walls, closer now, alive. The woman in red's laugh was a shard of glass, her smile splitting her face, her glass full, gleaming like fresh blood. The trucker's notebook was inches from me, my name scrawled in red ink, wet, dripping, pooling on the counter like blood. The old man's muttering was a snarl, a chant that clawed at my soul, pulling something closer. My heart pounded, a drum in my chest, barely drowning the hum that shook the room, ravenous, alive. The bartender's eyes, wet stones that never blinked, pinned me to the stool. The empty glass sat before me, its bitter residue coating my throat, my soul. The 5th rule, finish your drink, still burning in my mind. The jukebox's voices roared, my name a scream, 1,000 throats inside my blood, my bones. The clock read 1:15 a.m., but my phone showed 3:42 a.m., hours stolen, swallowed by this place. The rules, don't look behind you, don't speak unless spoken to, held me like iron, my legs lead, my voice gone. The shadows moved faster, reaching, curling like fingers around my neck, my heart. The old man was beside me now, his breath rancid, like rotting meat, his face dissolving into shadow, his eyes black pits that sucked in the light. His muttering was louder, a growl that tore at my mind, words I couldn't grasp but felt like a blade. The jukebox's voices were deafening, chanting my name, a chorus that shook my skull, my blood. The woman in red stared, her eyes too bright, her teeth too many, her laugh a scream that shattered my nerves. The trucker's notebook was closer, my name pulsing, alive, the ink spreading like a stain. Something cold brushed my arm again, not human, not real, a touch that burned like frost, sinking into my skin. I wanted to scream, to run, to break the rules and tear through the door, but the seventh rule, you don't choose when to leave, locked me in place. The shadows were alive now, stretching, reaching, forming hands, faces, things with no shape, closing in. The hum was a pulse, shaking the walls, my body, my soul. The old man leaned closer, his face melting, his breath a stench that choked me. The bartender's grin widened, too wide, his teeth glinting like knives, his eyes voids. His voice cut through the chaos, low, heavy, a hammer in the dark. Last rule, don't scream. My breath caught, my throat locked. The urge to scream was a fire in my chest, but the rule choked it, held it. The shadows were inches away, their fingers cold, curling around my arms, my heart. The jukebox's voices screamed my name, the old man's hand hovered, the trucker's notebook bled, and the bar closed in, a trap, a grave. I was trapped, the rules tightening, the shadows alive, pulling me into the dark. The last rule, don't scream, was a chain around my throat, but the shadows, alive and clawing, pushed me past breaking. The cursed bar's air was a noose, thick with stale beer and that sour, bloody stench that burned my lungs. Dim bulbs flickered, shadows twisting into hands, eyes, shapes with too many limbs, curling around me, inches from my skin. The woman in red's laugh was a scream, her smile splitting her face, her glass full, gleaming like blood. The trucker's notebook bled my name, red ink pooling on the counter, alive, pulsing. The old man's muttering was a growl, his face melting into shadow, his eyes black pits, inches from mine. My heart pounded, a drum in my chest, barely drowning the jukebox's voices, chanting my name, 1,000 throats in my blood, my bones. The bartender's eyes, wet stones that never blinked, pinned me to the stool. The empty glass sat before me, its bitter residue coating my soul. The fifth rule, finish your drink, still burning. The clock read 1:15 a.m., but my phone showed 3:42 a.m., hours stolen, swallowed by this place. The rules, don't look behind you, don't speak, don't leave, held me like iron, my legs lead, my voice trapped. The shadows were alive, their fingers cold, brushing my arms, my neck, burning like frost. The old man leaned closer, his breath rancid, like rotting meat, his hand hovering, trembling, like he was reaching for my soul. The jukebox's voices roared, my name a curse, shaking my skull, my blood. The woman in red stared, her eyes too bright, her teeth too many. The trucker's notebook was closer, my name everywhere, red and wet, spreading like a stain. Something cold grabbed my arm, not human, not real, a grip that burned, sank into my bones. My chest was fire, my throat a knot, the rules choking me, don't scream, don't scream. But the shadows closed in, the voices screamed my name, the old man's eyes swallowed the light, and I couldn't hold it. I screamed, loud, raw, breaking the last rule, the fourth rule, every rule. The room shook, the bulbs flickered, the hum turned to a roar, 1,000 voices howling back. The bartender's grin split wider, his teeth knives. The woman in red laughed, a sound that shattered my nerves. The trucker's notebook slammed shut, ink dripping. The old man's hand lunged, cold, clawing, but I yanked free, my arm burning, marked. I stumbled off the stool, my legs shaking, and threw myself at the door. It was heavy, locked, but I slammed my shoulder into it, again, screaming, breaking every rule. The shadows reached, the voices roared, the hum was a blade in my skull. The door gave, bursting open, and I fell into the street, gasping, the cold air biting my lungs. The bar was gone. Just an empty lot, weeds choking cracked pavement, no sign, no building, nothing. My phone buzzed, Sarah's text, where are you? It's 6 a.m. 5 hours gone, stolen. My arm burned, scratched, bleeding, words forming in the marks, you broke the rules. The hum was still there, faint, in my head, calling me back. The bar was gone, but its rules clung to me like a curse. The words you broke the rules scratched into my arm, burning, bleeding, alive. I stumbled into the empty lot, weeds choking cracked pavement, the neon sign's glow vanished, leaving only cold, biting air. My lungs heaved, gasping, the sour, bloody stench of the cursed bar still coating my throat. The hum lingered, faint but relentless, pulsing in my ears, my blood. My phone buzzed, Sarah's text glaring, where are you? It's 6 a.m. 5 hours stolen, ripped away, like the bar had eaten them. My arm throbbed, the scratches deep, red, forming words that hadn't been there moments ago, you broke the rules. My heart pounded, a drum in my chest, drowning out the world. I ran, boots slipping on the pavement, the lot stretching too far, too empty. The town was silent, no cars, no lights, just the wind hissing through alleys. My car was still at the diner, a mile back. I sprinted, breath ragged, the hum following, low, steady, like footsteps in my head. The scratches burned, the words pulsing, alive, like the bar was still inside me. I reached the diner, its neon sign dim, the parking lot empty except for my beat-up sedan. I fumbled the keys, hands shaking, the hum louder now, chanting my name, faint but clear. I glanced at my arm, you broke the rules, the scratches deeper, wet, red, spreading like ink. I drove, tires screaming, the town blurring past. The hum was in the car, in my skull, a whisper that wouldn't stop. My throat was raw, the taste of that liquid, ash, death, blood. Still there, coating my tongue. My phone buzzed again, Sarah's name flashing, but I couldn't look, couldn't stop. The road stretched, too long, too dark, like it was pulling me back. I reached my apartment, a rundown box on the edge of town, and stumbled inside, locking the door, checking it twice, 3 times. The hum was fainter but there, in the walls, the air, my blood. I collapsed on the couch, my arm burning, the scratches now a sentence, clear, red, you broke the rules, and they see you. I didn't sleep. The hum kept me awake, a pulse in my head, my bones. I checked the scratches, tracing them under the bathroom light. They were deeper, words carved into my skin, bleeding slow. I washed them, scrubbed until my arm was raw, but the words stayed, pulsing, alive. The mirror showed my face, pale, eyes bloodshot, like the trucker's, like I was becoming him. The hum grew louder, chanting my name, the jukebox's voices following me. I closed my eyes, saw the bar, the bartender's grin, the woman's sharp teeth, the old man's black eyes. They were here, in the room, in the shadows, watching. Night came, and the hum was a scream, my name everywhere, in the walls, the air, my blood. I checked my arm, new scratches, new words, they're coming for you. The shadows moved, sliding across the walls, hands, eyes, shapes with no name. The hum was a voice now, the bartender's, low, gravelly, you broke the rules. I grabbed my phone, called Sarah, but the line was static, the jukebox's voices chanting through it. The shadows reached, cold, alive, and I knew, they'd never let me go. The bar wasn't gone. It was inside me, calling me back, forever.